Chapter 12 is the final chapter of what's known as the prologue. The first 12 chapters of the book, scholars sort of separate them out and say that, all right, those first 12 get everything going. You know, they set the rules of the game and get the characters and the plot in motion. So when we get there, we've already dealt with the primary story, I would say, the creation of the monkey character and his whole genesis, if you will. And then we get to, finally, the guy who's supposed to be the main character, the protagonist of this story, and that is the monk. The guy who is based on the real person, and we are led through his selection and the initiation of the plot itself, the idea of this journey. But the terms that lead up to that, even in this chapter, are significant because the curiosities start to pile up. We are told that there is a government policy paper, essentially, that has been issued in the course of events that takes a rather bitchy tone with Buddhists, and it's a little arch, let's say. It is not difficult to understand where they're coming from with this because they are so unashamedly bigoted with it. But recognizing that is part of the problem. And the fact that the government felt free to write this down, what they whisper around the water cooler is one thing, but if you're actually putting it down in a government document, that's something. That shows a baked-in brazenness within the authoritative structure of the society as a whole. So just look at that one little passage. The teachings of the Western territory deny the relations of ruler and subject, of father and son. With the doctrine of the three ways and the sixfold path, they beguile and seduce the foolish and the simple-minded. They emphasize the sins of the past in order to ensure the felicities of the future. By chanting in Sanskrit, they seek a way of escape. We submit, however, that birth, death, and the length of one's life are ordered by nature, but the conditions of public disgrace or honor are determined by human volition. These phenomena are not, as some Philistines would now maintain, ordained by Buddha. The teachings of Buddha did not exist at the time of the 3 kings and the 5 emperors, and yet those rulers were wise, their subjects loyal, and their reigns long-lasting. It was not until the period of Emperor Ming in the Han Dynasty that the worship of foreign gods was established, but this meant only that priests of the Western territory were permitted to propagate their faith. The event, in fact, represented a foreign intrusion in China, and the teachings are hardly worthy to be believed. Pick through this point by point as they go through. The teachings of the Western territory, which is Western, is the more heavily Buddhist because it is closer to India. The teachings of the Western territory deny the relations of ruler and subject, of father and son. Now, you Google Confucianism, and one of the first things that will come up is the phrase filial piety, which is the respect for one's parents. You are supposed to be a good citizen, you need to be a good child to your parents. And that relationship is considered sacred as much as anything is sacred here. And the idea that that relationship of parent and child is actually also a representation of the relationship between the emperor and the subject, where it is a lifelong, absolute fealty. There is no breaking out of that. The father, son, emperor, subject devotion is considered absolute and eternal. And it is a great dishonor to violate that. If you disrespect, or if you show disrespect to your emperor, it is like showing disrespect to your father. Imagine the effect that that has on a society. And so this one sentence here, the teachings of the Western tradition deny the relations of ruler and subject, of father and son, expressly suggests that those Buddhists generally, those people, are bad because their religion is bad because it is not Confucian enough, is basically what they're saying. If it were more Confucian, then it would be more explicit about the role of the father and the son and the emperor and the subject. And it doesn't say much at all about that, because it is more of a spiritual belief than a behavioral model. In Confucianism, they don't really care what's going on a spiritual level. They don't really care if you love your mommy and daddy or you love the emperor, but they care that you behave appropriately towards them. You know? It is outward. And so that first sentence all automatically sends off some flares that, well, they're kind of judging the Buddhists unfairly here, quite frankly. They are condemning Buddhists because they are not Confucian enough in the way they practice Buddhism, which is a little unfair, I would have to say. With the doctrines of the three ways and the sixfold paths, they beguile and seduce the foolish and the simple-minded. That is just naked bigotry right there. You know, they're dumb, and so they follow the Buddhist way. They emphasize the sins of the past in order to ensure the felicities of the future. Again, kind of pejorative, I think. By chanting in Sanskrit, they seek a way of escape. You got to appreciate the topspin that they put on in Sanskrit. Also, you can also see as a way of, they seek a way of escape. Even that phrase is not empty, because remember, Confucianism is about this world. It is about a social construct. It is about how you behave in an obvious and objective way in this world. It has nothing to do with spirituality and some other world somewhere. But it is material. To escape from that is to deny the material, to deny the idealistic side of your brain, to deny perhaps even heaven. So even that little phrase is significant. We submit, however, that birth, death, and the length of one's life are ordered by nature. And you gotta love that. We submit, however, like, okay, we will admit, we'll give you this. And that there is a tie of all these things. And notice the birth, death, and whatever is somewhat cyclical in its phrasing here, suggesting like, okay, they're granting that, okay, there is something perhaps to the reincarnation model. There is some prevailing ideology about or some prevailing significance to the role of nature in all of these things. And nature is really coming up with a Taoist angle here. The conditions of public disgrace and honor are determined by human volition. Volition meaning will, human will. Those are social. They are about people dealing with one another. They're not some absolute thing where, okay, good and bad is determined by God. It's not an ethical or a moral construct. It's a social construct. All of these things are showing how baked into this society these divisions are. The hostilities are. They're just stripped down in this one little letter of a government policy paper, essentially, that we're getting at the beginning of this journey. It is, again, beginnings and endings. Always look at beginnings and endings. the beginning of this ending starts with this stupid letter. It's like, well, what do I care about? You know, the government issues a paper. Oh boy, you know, governments love issuing papers, and they're always saying stuff, and who cares? You know, it's all nothing. But no, you have to look at it more closely, and slowly these little hints start to crop out that this society has a problem with the relations between its people, its belief systems, its cultures, and that any attempt to control all of them, as an emperor is obligated to do, needs to start by confronting this very problem. That all of this is baked into the society itself, baked into the government itself. And recognizing the problem is the first step towards the solution, and to put it in a really trite way.